America, we are back! I have just landed this second. I'm so excited.
Can someone give me a good enough reason not to move to this country? America is literally the UK on steroids times 5 million, bro.
Friends, I am so excited. I was starting to think this day would never come, but it has.
There is something very strange happening to many British travelers after leaving the United States. They board the plane to return home. They packed their bags. They returned to their daily lives. But just a few days later, they opened their laptops again, not to look at nostalgic photos, but to find a ticket back to America. Some even started to wonder if they should move there. The noteworthy thing is, before the trip, none of them had that plan. So what happened? What in America turned a normal vacation into a life-changing decision? In today's video, we will follow the genuine reactions of British tourists and explore why their unexpected change has surprised many Americans as well. There is one point I find very interesting when watching dozens of shares from these British travelers. Almost no one starts the journey with a grand decision. No one says, "I will go to America to find a place to settle." No one said, "This trip will change my life." Everything is much simpler. Most people think, just go once to know. Some people see this as a self-gift after many years of working. Some people just want to add another name to the list of places they've been. Some people are eager to see New York in real life, eat an American-style burger, and visit Walmart or Target to see if they are really as huge as they are online. In other words, in their minds, this is just a vacation. And perhaps that is the very thing worth mentioning, because when we have high expectations, it's easy to be disappointed. But when we only think we'll have an ordinary trip, every surprise becomes much more memorable.
Hopped at the plane at LAX with a dream of my cardigan. Forgotten the rest of the fucking words. We're back in the USA, mate. We've just landed in Los Angeles.
Just walking through the streets of New York got me so
I
excited.
got my first compliment. Mind you, this lady was in a rush and she still had time to tell me I'm beautiful.
Watching these reaction clips, I really like one detail. Many people just got off the plane and were smiling like children. Some people continuously filmed videos pointing at each familiar store and exclaiming, "I'm back!" Some people are just excited to see a pickup truck drive by. Those reactions are not like trying to create content just to get views. It feels like the anticipation of someone who has been waiting for something for a very long time. But at that moment, they still had no idea where this journey would take them. What they were concerned about was just what to eat today, where to go tomorrow, whether to visit the national park or drive to the neighboring state over the weekend. All the plans are still very simple, very touristy. Then each day passed. They started meeting new people, seeing new landscapes, experience things that I used to only see on YouTube or in movies.
Today, I'm flying back to the greatest country in the world, America. I'm a fully documented legal immigrant.
I just moved to the US a few years ago. Yellowstone was the first thing we put on our list that we wanted to do. And finally now here, 4 years later, and checking it out. And it's, I'd say, living up to expectations. Wow.
And a very small change began to appear. No one noticed it at that moment. But if you pay close attention to what they say later, you will see a common pattern. They no longer talk much about, "I went to America." Instead, they started saying, "Which state will we go back to next time?" It may sound like just a few words different, but psychologically, it's a very significant shift. It means that in their minds, America is no longer just a destination to check in. It is starting to become a place they want to continue exploring. That's also why I completely agree with a comment from a British tourist. He said that what surprised him was not a specific city, but the feeling of always knowing that there are still countless places to visit and countless things to experience ahead. It is that feeling that makes a trip seem never enough.
I went to America expecting to enjoy it, but I didn't expect to come home wanting to move there. I've travelled around quite a bit, but the USA just hit differently, and I don't even think it was one city or place in specific. It was that feeling of having so much to explore. I mean, every state has so much for you to experience, and now I want to make it my home someday.
If you're curious about what has caused so many people to change their minds so quickly, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on interesting stories like this. Each of your supports is the motivation for me to continue searching and analyzing very ordinary yet surprisingly unique perspectives about America. And then the most interesting part began to happen. That change didn't happen when they were strolling in New York, not when they were admiring the Grand Canyon or having a barbecue. It only truly revealed itself when they pulled the suitcase out to the airport to return to England. That was also the moment when our story began to take a completely different turn. The interesting thing is, when watching dozens of videos from British tourists, I realized they hardly spend much time talking about the famous landmarks that everyone knows. They don't constantly mention the Statue of Liberty, not talking too much about Hollywood. Even Times Square only makes a brief appearance. What they keep repeating is very ordinary things.
These are 3 things that Americans find normal, but British people are shocked about. Number 1 is that strangers are so friendly in America. When we went traveling there, every person we passed in the street pretty much said hello, and we would stop talking to them for 5 to 10 minutes in the best way possible. We had the best conversations. That doesn't necessarily happen in the UK.
A barista smiled and said, "Have a nice day." A server proactively strikes up a conversation. A stranger on the street is ready to give directions, ask how you're doing, or simply smile. It may sound trivial, but those seemingly trivial things keep appearing repeatedly in almost every story.
I'm a French person in America for the World Cup, and here are some things that I found absolutely crazy about the United States. Number 1. There are actually nice people in America. People have been very kind to me and very helpful, and I didn't know that America had nice people.
I think this is also a very interesting point about human psychology. We often think that we will remember the grandest structures or the most famous landmarks. The reality is different. What lingers the longest is often the feeling you get when you are in a place. You might forget what you ate on the 3rd day of the trip, but you can hardly forget the feeling of being treated kindly. That's why many tourists in the videos all use the same word, welcoming, the feeling of being welcomed. Especially when they visit southern states like Texas or Tennessee, they talk about very natural greetings like, "How y'all doing?" or "Y'all have a good day." For many Americans, that might just be a familiar way of communicating every day. But for many British tourists, those greetings make their entire day more enjoyable.
I'm a Brit in America, and I am back in Houston. I was walking through the airport, and the feeling never goes away. So I've been back in the UK for 10 days for a wedding. It was great catching up with friends, family, all that sort of stuff. But I was walking through the terminal once we'd landed, and I was like smiling to myself, and people must have thought this guy's weird. But I was just genuinely excited to be back. And even though I've flown back and forth between the UK and the US so many times over the last 4 years, the feeling just never gets old. It's just like an overwhelming sensation of just excitement. And I don't really know where it comes from, but I suppose it's a good thing. You know, it's a country that you live in. You should be excited to.
And this is something I find worth pondering. Perhaps what makes many people remember a country is not always its iconic landmarks, but rather the feeling of belonging to that place, even if only for a few short days. That's why, the more I watch these reaction clips, the more I understand why many people don't say, "I miss New York." They say, "I miss the feeling of being in America." Those are 2 completely different sentences. One sentence is about a location, a sentence about emotions, and emotions always linger much longer. If you've ever had a trip that you remembered not for the beautiful scenery, but for the people there, please share in the comments. I would love to read your stories. And if you find these perspectives interesting, don't forget to give a like and subscribe to accompany the channel in the next videos. But wait, friendliness is just the first piece of the puzzle. What really makes many British tourists change their plans comes from another discovery. They began to realize that America is not a destination that can be fully explored in just one trip. And that very realization made them unable to stop thinking about their next return. At this point, many people might think, so the British like America because of the good food, friendly people, or beautiful scenery. Right. But not enough. Because after watching all these reaction clips, I realized there is a much more interesting common point. The reason they come back is not because they have explored all of America, but because they realized we have just begun.
Guys, we have a huge problem. James and I are so bored already of the UK. We haven't even been back for 7 days and we're already planning our next trip to America. When I tell you, America is the most gorgeous, most beautiful place I have ever seen in my life, I am not joking. The nature, the scenery, the people, everything about America I have fallen head over heels for. And we only explored the tiniest part of America and we were mind blown. This is how crazy America is, in the best way possible. Driving along in the RV, going through these beautiful roads, trees everywhere, pretty much in the mountains, in the forest.
That's the real twist. Some people who have just set foot in Michigan excitedly say, this time, we will explore this state. While others are planning a trip to Texas, some people are so in love with Yellowstone that they say this trip has exceeded all expectations. Some people just finished their journey in New York and immediately ask the community, should I go to Houston or Miami next time? Hearing those questions, I noticed a very interesting detail. No one asks anymore. Will I go back to the US? They only ask, which state will we go to next time? Those are two completely different ways of thinking. A question that expresses hesitation. The other sentence assumes that there will definitely be another trip. And this is perhaps the most special thing about America. Many countries are famous for a few iconic cities. You can quite clearly envision your trip before setting off. But with America, that feeling is completely different. Today you drive among the skyscrapers of New York. Tomorrow you might stand before the vast fields of Texas. A few days later, you will find yourself amidst the majestic nature of Yellowstone. Then continue exploring the old streets of Savannah or the vibrant atmosphere of Atlanta. Each state has its own unique character. Each region has its own cuisine, dialect, pace of life, and culture. That is what makes many tourists feel like they are traveling through multiple countries within the same nation. That's why a British guy once said something I really liked. I haven't even scratched the surface of America. Sounds simple. But that statement explains almost all the reasons they change their minds. People inherently enjoy the feeling of achieving a goal, but they are also strongly drawn to unfinished journeys.
Never in my life have we been so excited to come back to a country before. For example, we've been to places like Southeast Asia, we've been to Greece. Don't get me wrong, they are beautiful and we had the best time, but we haven't been to a place before and felt like we could actually live there. James.
And America really did that for us.
It actually did. Like, we felt at home and we had so much fun. There were so much things to see.
I really cannot believe how scenic America is and was.
America, in the eyes of many tourists, is like a thick book that they have only read the first few chapters of. You just finished exploring one state when you hear someone recommend 3 more. You just tried Raising Cane's. And then someone else told you that you absolutely have to eat barbecue in Texas. You just went to Target and then got suggested Costco, Buc-ee's, or famous road trip routes. The list of things to try keeps getting longer. And from there, the original plan began to change. Instead of saying, I went to America, they changed it to, I still have to go back. I think this is also the reason why many videos of British travelers do not end at the airport. On the contrary, as soon as they get home, they open the map, read the comments, and ask the audience which state they should visit next. The journey that seemed to have ended inadvertently opens up a new journey. If you find it interesting so far, please like and subscribe to support the channel. There are still many surprising stories ahead that even Americans might not think foreign tourists would pay attention to. And speaking of surprises, the next part is even more interesting. Because it turns out that what makes many Brits miss America the most is not the Grand Canyon, not Hollywood, or any famous landmarks, but rather very ordinary things. Even so small that Americans themselves often take them for granted. And this is probably my favorite part of all these reactions. Because after hearing dozens of British tourists talk about America, I thought they would remember the really grand things. For example, the Statue of Liberty, Grand Canyon, or the skyscrapers in New York. But no, what they keep bringing up are things that perhaps many Americans see as too normal. These automatic car washes are quite ordinary for Americans, but for European customers, they are nothing short of a great invention. But that's not all. Even the food and drinks make them exclaim in admiration. In England, a cup of water is already big enough. In America, that cup of water suddenly resembles an unlimited upgrade version. Larger food. Drinks are bigger. Even the cars driving on the road are bigger. There was a guy who, upon seeing the pickup truck, shouted, "These cars look like they just stepped out of a movie." But wait, that's not the funniest part yet. A reaction clip that made me rewind and watch it several times is the scene of an English guy standing in the middle of a wide road and saying, "I feel like I'm in GTA." It sounds a bit exaggerated, but looking at their expression, it's clear they are not acting. The road is wide, giant truck, open space. Everything feels very different from what she is used to back home. And then came Texas. The story gets even more interesting. Someone was leisurely walking their dog when they discovered a snake. The first reaction was not to take out the phone to record a video, but rather, frozen in place. Then came the very true statement, "We really are in Texas." Not yet. Another person saw the giant bee perched on the porch. He kept asking, "How do we deal with this?" Then joked that it felt like stepping into Jurassic Park. Seeing this, I can only laugh. Because for the locals, these things might not be anything special. But for a tourist from England, those are the memories they will always remember. This reminds me of another very interesting detail. Some people say that what they remember most after the trip is not a famous restaurant, but rather a gas station. That's right, a gas station, not for refueling. But because there were all kinds of food and drinks, giant cups, and the feeling of stopping to rest during a long road trip, some people even confessed that after returning to England, they still miss a bottle of ranch dressing. It sounds funny, really, but the more I think about it, the more it makes sense. Because beautiful memories are rarely created from things that are too grand. It often comes from very ordinary moments. I think that's also the reason why many tourists don't say, "I miss the famous landmarks." They say, "I miss life there." Those are two completely different feelings. If you've ever had a trip where the most memorable part was the tiny details rather than the famous landmarks, please share in the comments. Who knows, your story might be similar to those British tourists in this video. But all those giant cakes, wide roads, or special gas stations were not the biggest reasons for them to change their plans. Because after all those experiences, many people began to realize something even more surprising. They no longer want America to be just a place to visit, but it has gradually become a place they want to return to time and time again. At this point, I think many people will understand why the title of this video is not "The Englishman Loves America." Because what is truly worth mentioning does not lie in the affection, but lies in the change. There is a moment that appears repeatedly in many of the reactions I've watched. That's when the trip has ended. They have boarded the plane, have returned to England. The suitcase has been put away in the corner of the room. But the mind seems to still be across the Atlantic. Some people admit that more than a month after returning, their biological clocks still follow American time. At night, they still stay awake. And during the day, they still feel sleepy, as if their bodies had never truly left that trip. Some people say that every evening they open their phones to look at old photos, watch videos they recorded in Texas, Michigan, or New York, and unconsciously think, "I wonder when I'll be able to go back." There are also those who are more straightforward. They said, "Every time I come to the US, I want to move there more." What impresses me is that no one gives just one reason, not because of a city, not because of a job. It's not because of a famous location either. It's the sum of many small experiences. It's the feeling of driving on open roads. It's the brief conversations with strangers. It's the feeling that every weekend there's still a new place to explore. It's the thought that if I stayed for another month, I probably still wouldn't have explored everything. Perhaps that is what has created what many jokingly call Boston blues, the feeling of missing America after having left. Sounds like a joke. But behind it is a very real emotion. And I believe that many people who have traveled will also empathize with this. Sometimes what we remember the most is not a place, but rather the version of ourselves when we are there. A more comfortable version, more open, more ready to explore. Perhaps that's why so many British tourists no longer say, "I just went on holiday." They started saying, "I will definitely come back." Some even set a goal to explore all 50 states. Some people want to create long-term content in the US. Some people are starting to explore life in Texas or the southern states. It's no longer a plan for a vacation, but rather a plan for a new journey. And perhaps this is what surprises quite a few Americans as well. Not because British tourists praised America, but because after just one trip, many people have changed their entire list of priorities in life. And before concluding, there is still a very thought-provoking question. Is what makes these tourists remember America truly found in America itself? Or in the special emotions they experienced during that very journey? That will also be something we reflect on in the conclusion of the video. And that is also the story of many British tourists after their trip to America. What changes them is not necessarily a famous landmark or a glamorous moment, but the very ordinary experiences that left a deep impression on them. And what about you? If you've ever been to the US, what do you remember most after the trip? If you have never been, which state would you want to explore first? Please share your thoughts in the comments section. I really want to read and discuss with everyone. If you enjoy reaction videos combined with analysis about culture, society, and interesting perspectives surrounding America, as well as international life, don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss the next videos. Your support is a great motivation for me to continue bringing higher quality content. Thank you sincerely and see you in the next video. The content in the video is compiled from the experiences, shares, and personal perspectives of the characters appearing in the original videos, combined with commentary and analysis for the purpose of information, education, and discussion. The video is not intended to generalize, represent, or evaluate the entire people, culture, or society of any country. The experience of each individual may vary depending on the time, place, and specific circumstances. The audience is encouraged to consult multiple sources of information and form their own perspective,